Chapter 3. My Picture-Perfect Life Before 30. Now this is what the Lord says. I have called my children by name, and you are mine. Isaiah 43:1. My life had been an amazingly happy one. The memories I hold of my first 30 years are of a fairy tale childhood and young adulthood. I was raised in the quickly growing Central Florida town of Lakeland, where I lived with my fun-loving identical twin sister, Kimberly Anna, as I called her, though her given name was Kimberly Ann, and two parents who seemed to adore me as much as I adored them. My father worked long, hard hours at the family-owned juice company, Juice Bowl, and my mother returned to work for the school system when my sister and I were 5 months old. Yet, despite their strong involvement in their careers, never once did I feel that we, as their children, were not their top priority. Never once did I question their unconditional love for me. And there was not a day that I was not warmed by the love they felt for each other. Our house was a playful one, with my dad frequently bestowing my mom with love taps on the rear end, and always throwing us girls high in the air. Our time together was precious, leaving lasting memories of love and togetherness. I always hoped for such a relationship with my future husband, and God did not disappoint me. Also part of our close-knit family over the years was our Springer Spaniel, Ichi, our small poodle mix, Pumpkin, and two stray cats, Shufi and Cinnamon. Though I was brought home from the hospital to a house in a smaller neighborhood in town, my memories do not begin until our second home, on Lake Bentley Court. Kim and I had our own separate rooms, though we snuck into each other's rooms to sleep until we were well over 8, and my parents enjoyed the privacy of the master bedroom on the other side of the rather small house. I most remember my parents putting a little telephone in both my room and Kim's room, which were connected by a wire that ran through the short hall separating our rooms. These telephones were good only for us girls to talk to each other, but we loved it. My favorite memory of that house, however, occurred outside the back sliding glass door. Behind the house was a small creek that led to Lake Bentley, and we were especially privileged to have a pool. Oh, how I loved that pool. My mother taught us to swim before I have any memory of fearing water, and as a Florida girl, all I ever wanted to do was swim. As preschoolers, Kim and I rode our tricycles around the pool every day until we caught the northwest corner of the pool with our third wheel and flopped over into the water. This may sound frightening to many parents, but this was simply our routine. My father returned nightly from his demanding job, changed into his bathing suit, and retrieved 2 tricycles from the bottom of the pool, and the next morning was a new day. As we grew older, the bicycles were no longer allowed on the pool deck, but I still spent most of my time there. As my sister became interested in other things, I still just wanted to swim. My favorite time to swim in the pool was when a Florida hurricane was forecast. The winds gusted, the trees swayed, the sky was dark, and best of all, my parents threw all the pool furniture into the pool to keep it from blowing around the pool deck. What fun I had pretending I was a mermaid in my watery home, complete with living room furniture. We also often played in the creek, where we searched for fish or played imaginary games with our beloved neighbors. As we grew older, we also enjoyed the lake with an old yellow paddle boat and eventually a jet ski. Whee! Music had become an important part of my life by the 5th grade, though I had already played the piano for many years. I had enjoyed the piano, but it had not interested me as much as, say, swimming or reading. But in the 5th grade, our class was given the opportunity to take string lessons. As the instructor presented the 4 string instruments, most students picked the violin, which is why I did not. The cello had a beautiful sound, but I couldn't imagine lugging it on and off the bus each day. The string bass, obviously, was dismissed in my thinking for similar reasons, only bigger. In fact, I think everyone in my class dismissed that one. Finally, the viola was presented. Everyone else in the class had already settled on the instrument they planned to play, though only 5 of us actually continued to play into the 6th grade. I was struck by the deeper sound of the viola, combined with the posture of the violinist, and then Mr. Yoho sealed the deal for me. He said, "Very few people play the viola. If you play it fairly well, it could take you through college on a music scholarship." That immediately became my plan, and Mr. Yoho's promise was realized when I received a partial music scholarship to my top choice school, Davidson College in North Carolina, where I spent 3.5 enlightening years. I have little to say about my high school years, though I enjoyed them very much. They were filled with family, music, and classes, and much of it has become a blur of concerts and music competitions. As Kim and I grew older, we grew more and more different. Perhaps it was an intentional attempt to become individuals instead of being one part of the constant reference to the twins. Or perhaps we were just growing into the women God intended us to become. Kim was the popular and social one, while I was quietly attempting to master the viola. We were as different as night and day, but she remained my best friend throughout. What a blessing to have your best friend just across the hall as you struggle through the awkwardness of growing through adolescence to young adulthood. Chapter 4. My Best Friend. And now these 3 remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. 1 Corinthians 13:13. During the summer before my senior year of high school, I had a minor operation on my jaw. Scar tissue had built up due to constant pressure from excessive viola playing. A friend came to check on me and brought a friend of his, a freshman at Northwestern University who had graduated from Lakeland High School the year before, where I had known him only as an acquaintance. But I certainly knew him by reputation as an amazing trumpet player, the best to ever graduate from Lakeland, or possibly any Florida school. His name was Derek Milligan, and he was stunningly handsome. He also played the trumpet like, well, I just can't do it justice on paper. Suffice it to say that when he played his horn, my knees grew weak. I was floored when he called and asked me out on a date, and I have been smitten ever since. He is my best friend and has been my husband for more than 11 years. Derek did much more for me than just become the greatest earthly gift God has given me. He was the one who introduced me to what a real relationship with God could look like. I had grown up singing in our church choir and attending church on occasion, and I would have told you that I was a Christian and that I believed in God, but I had no idea what it meant to truly love God, to serve Him in everything you do, and seek His will for my life. My life had been so blessed thus far that I held a belief that though He must exist, I didn't need Him. I was obviously doing all right on my own. I failed to realize that all the blessings in my life were from Him. They had nothing to do with my own strength or accomplishments, and without God they meant absolutely nothing. I had no idea what peace and joy that relationship could bring. Derek was the one God used to bring me to Him. I love that. Leaving for college meant leaving my sister, but at Davidson I was blessed with a special group of fun-loving roommates, with whom I giggled through every night and discussed every topic from calculus to world hunger. I also had another spirit-filled group of friends I met through a national campus organization called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, many of whom touched my soul during those years. I was a baby Christian, thirsting for answers, and our late-night theological debates and discussions, often over a game of spades, helped solidify the foundation of my spiritual walk. My beloved friends are scattered all over the country now, and though I speak with most of them rarely, I miss them dearly. The imprints they have left on my life are eternal. I was sure that during my time at Davidson, Derek would meet some cute Northwestern girl, but as it turned out, he remained patient enough to wait for me to finish college even after he left Northwestern. He spent the 2 years between his graduation and mine working as a high school band director in Mulberry, Florida. We often visited each other, and phone calls were frequent and expensive, but we always seemed to have much to share. Though I saw him rarely during my Davidson years, he shares the majority of my memories from that time. After completing my bachelor's degree in comparative religion at Davidson a semester early, I went straight to Florida State University to begin my master's degree in orientation and mobility for the blind. My plan was to finish the coursework before the coming fall, when my soon-to-be brand-new handsome husband would begin his master's degree in trumpet performance at the University of Michigan. Chapter 5. Training Little People. Train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old he will not turn from it. Proverbs 22:6. After a fun week at the beach with our friends and the perfect fairy tale summer wedding, Derek left his bachelorhood apartment and job as the band director of Mulberry High School. He came to Tallahassee for the summer as I completed my coursework, and we then quickly moved into a sight-unseen, tiny apartment in Farmington Hills, Michigan. We chose that apartment because it was approximately halfway between the University of Michigan and Rochester Hills, the location of Leader Dogs for the Blind, my employer once my internship for my master's degree was complete. Though the apartment was tiny, I loved it there. I had my dream job training guide dogs, and I came home to my amazing husband every night. I most remember the frequent evenings when I pulled a burned creation of some sort out of the oven. These failures always won me a warm hug and dinner out. Most weekends were spent attending Derek's performances in Ann Arbor or with the Adrian Symphony, where Derek had won an audition for the town's local orchestra. Derek was proving himself an impressive performer in a world of many strong performers. He was even offered a job touring Europe with a Broadway show. Though he turned down the offer to allow me to complete my apprenticeship at Leader Dogs, it was exciting for him to have the opportunity. His talents gave us so many wonderful opportunities for adventure and fun. It was while we were still living in this tiny apartment that I fell in love with a little black lab in my string of dogs at work. She was one of my best workers, and though I would miss her, as I did many others, I was excited about the freedom and opportunities she could give one of the amazing people who came to Leader Dogs for a dog guide. However, we quickly noticed that Jenna was unwilling to work for her new handler unless I was there to repeat the command. When the quiet woman from Texas gave Jenna a command of, for example, Jenna forward, or Jenna come, she remained completely still, as if she did not hear, staring only at me. Only when I repeated the command did the little lab obey. After a week of praying that time would allow the dog to attach to the new handler, we, as trainers, agreed that either I would have to return with the student to Texas to forever repeat commands, or, more realistically, the dog would have to be taken from the student and rejected from the training program. Now, we were careful not to call the dogs removed from the program rejects. After all, we did not want to affect the dog's fragile self-esteem. Instead, these dogs were referred to as career change dogs, and Jenna's new career was to accompany me home and be my closest buddy for years and years to come. At Leader Dogs, I was blessed with several mentors who taught me more than I ever realized I needed to know. I will forever be a better trainer and instructor due to the patience and wisdom of senior trainers at Leader Dogs. I was so in love with the work of training dogs and instructing students who were visually impaired that I was sure this was the work for which God had created me. Then I discovered I was pregnant. As you can imagine, my world was about to change drastically. My training schedule at Leader Dogs involved 4 months of training my string of 10 dogs, followed by 28 days of living in the dormitory with the students who would be instructed on how to use the dogs. I completed my last class 1 month before Ashley was born. I vividly remember my joy mixed with sobs, knowing I would soon hold my first child, and realizing that it would be many years before I could return to full-time training. Ashley was 5 days late, but worth the wait. She was the perfect baby, despite her inability to understand that daytime was for crying and nighttime was for sleeping. Her birth was a breeze compared to that of her brother, Luke, the largest of our children, born 2 years later at 9.8 pounds. Luke was the one child, of course, whom I chose to birth without any medication to dull the pain. Luke's journey, however, allowed for Rebecca to slide out 20 months later without even one push. Easy. Ashley was brought home to our house in Rochester Hills, just a few blocks from Leader Dogs for the Blind. Luke and Rebecca, however, were both born at Keller Army Hospital. When Ashley was just 7 months old, Derek won an audition for the United States Military Academy Band at West Point. It was a special Army band, meaning he would be admitted into the Army at a higher rank and would have a permanent assignment as a musician in the professional band at West Point. After a 9-week required time for Derek at boot camp, which turned into 10 very long weeks, we moved into a neat little town along the Hudson River, surrounded by mountains. Cornwall-on-Hudson, New York, became the home where 2 of our 3 children would be born and where many memories would be made. So by the age of 29, I was no longer training dogs. I was now training little people, which I found significantly more challenging, though the rewards were far greater and the principles were similar. Consistency combined with unconditional love. Oh, I know it is not that easy, but these are most definitely vital aspects of both dog training and child rearing. Wouldn't you moms and dads agree? A friend confirmed my belief when she informed me that Ruth Graham was reported to have said that the most important book any new parent should have is The Art of Raising a Puppy by the monks of New Skeet, a book I have always and will always have on my shelf. When Ashley turned 3, I realized it was time to find a preschool. After attending several open houses, I concluded that the preschools were doing nothing I was not capable of doing at home myself. And frankly, I just wasn't ready to be separated 3 hours several days a week from my oldest child. Derek and I decided that we would continue to look for another program through the year, and we would wait to enroll her until 4-year-old preschool. After another year, I was no closer to being ready to send her to school, so I instead joined forces with 3 other moms to establish an informal preschool co-op. We each found a curriculum to use in our work with our preschooler through the week, and on Fridays, we rotated between our homes, where the mother of the house was responsible that week for the learning activities that fit in with our previously established unit studies. In the fall, we completed a unit study on apples. In winter, we completed a unit study on snow, etc. We also scheduled 1 field trip a month, visiting places such as apple farms, a honey farm, the Crayola factory, a local aquarium, and various children museums. I had such great fun, both with the group of homeschooled preschool children and with one-on-one learning activities with Ashley, that I began to believe God wished us to homeschool Ashley for kindergarten. I had never even remotely considered the possibility, and in the end, God left me little choice. I could not help but ask God why. I finally went to Derek, partly in hopes that he might be my reason for having to forfeit the idea. The conversation went something like this. Derek, I think God is leading me to homeschool the children. Pause. Well, I suppose we should go for it then. What? Now what was I going to do? I suppose I was going to homeschool, which was clearly what I should do, despite the continued discouragement from some family and friends. Please do not misunderstand. This was certainly not something God has forced me into unwillingly. I love it. And as great struggles were soon to enter our lives, also came God's loving response to my question of not long ago. Kristen, this is why. God was constantly present during those early stages of my life, gently molding me into the person I became by age 29. As I look back, I clearly see his hand guiding me. But at the time, I thought I was moving of my own volition. Soon my lessons would become stronger and more painful, but the molding of my spirit would be dramatically deeper and quicker than the lessons of those relatively easy years. Chapter 6. Welcome Home. My child, give me your heart, and let your eyes observe my ways. Proverbs 23:26. For a short period after the surgery, I proudly handled our new burdens independently of God. I dutifully thanked him for the success of the surgery and for the blessings being showered on us by dear family and friends. I was never left alone for long, and never when there was any possibility that a child might need to be lifted. Derek's coworkers covered his responsibilities often, allowing him to be home caring for me and the children. We received meals from friends, acquaintances, and even people we had never met before for the entire 6 weeks I was recovering. Friends made the most beautiful Easter baskets for the children to enjoy, and it was one less project I needed to worry about. What a thoughtful blessing. Another friend came at least once a week to take my 2 older children on some sort of educational field trip, and another, referred to as the laundry angel, came twice a week to take my dirty laundry, returning it the following day washed and folded, gifting me additionally with her conversation, support, and encouragement. Wow, what a glorious vacation I was having. Despite my awareness of how blessed we were, I was struggling with pain and anxiety about my ability to return to my regular duties in 6 short weeks. I did not, however, invite God to be more involved in this time of struggle. I believed I could and should handle these challenges with independence and strength. It never occurred to me that God would so desperately want to carry me through this time. After birthing 3 children, I felt that liver surgery should be a piece of cake, and when gifted with so much support, it was, in fact, doable. It was not until a week after the surgery that I truly began to struggle. I was just getting my appetite back, and I soon realized that all food that entered my body, whether a couple bites of applesauce or a few ice chips, was soon pushed back up. The violent vomiting caused great pain and concern, as my stomach muscles contracted against the incisions trying to heal down from my chest and across my abdomen. Each day that I would dare to eat something, I would sit waiting until early afternoon, when I would begin to feel nauseous. The nausea would continue to worsen until sometime between late evening and the middle of the night, when I would throw up everything I had tried to eat that day. I began to look forward to the vomiting, as the relief after emptying my stomach was immediate. The day after the vomiting began, I returned to Westchester for my surgeon to remove the 22 remaining staples from my abdomen. Derek and I had reported the vomiting the previous day, and although he seemed somewhat concerned, Dr. Fasciuto suggested it was probably just a bug or minor food poisoning. We returned home expecting to not have to deal with the vomiting again. However, 2 hours later, I was ridding my body of the snack I had eaten that afternoon, the only food I had eaten that day. We waited for several days before calling the surgeon. He called in a prescription, thinking this would help the situation. It did not. The doctor sent us to Keller Army Hospital at West Point for 2 liters of IV saline, as I had not kept down even water for several days. By the following week, Dr. Fisciuto asked that I return to Westchester to be admitted. It had become necessary to insert a feeding tube in my nose, and the doctor was hoping that an endoscopy would show the doctors the cause of my difficulties, allowing a diagnosis and a cure. By this time, I was weak and hungry, and one night, when I got up from my chair, I passed out, presumably from the lack of nutrients. I looked forward to the procedure that should allow the doctors to solve my problem. An endoscopy is performed by a small camera on the end of a tube that is threaded through a larger tube into one's stomach. It sounds unpleasant, yes, but I was told that I would be asleep, and Derek was told if the procedure takes more than 5 minutes, it took too long. I remembered how powerful the anesthesia from my surgery had been, and I felt sure that I would remember nothing of this comparatively minor test. I was wrong. For reasons I still do not understand, the anesthesia did not work for me. It made me groggy enough that the gastrointestinal doctor felt he was able to insert a tube down my throat. I remember the nurse repeatedly saying to the doctor, as I tapped her leg, unable to speak due to the tube pressing against my vocal cords and filling my airway, "I don't think she is asleep." The doctor's response was always that it should take only another minute. Unfortunately, a test that should take no longer than 5 minutes took more than an hour and a half. Apparently, my stomach is J-shaped. Not a problem unless you are trying to locate with a tube and a camera the area where the stomach empties into the large intestine. Derek sat outside the procedure room, anxious that it was taking much longer than anticipated. Little did he know that I was also conscious as the doctor repeatedly removed and reinserted the tube down my esophagus and into my stomach. It was awful, but I was encouraged once it was over that the doctors would now know how to cease the vomiting and I could finally eat again. The doctors decided that I had a complication called gastroparesis, a paralysis of the stomach, probably caused by nicking a nerve during the surgery, and they were not sure it would correct itself. There was nothing they could do. I remained in the hospital for 4 days, during which time they fed me liquid food through the tube in my nose, which bypassed my stomach and emptied instead directly into my large intestine. The feeding tube rubbed against the back of my throat with every breath, and frequent spritzes of Chloraseptic, brought by Derek from a local drugstore, did little to numb my throat or lessen the intense irritation. On the 4th day, my dear friend who had been staying with my children during the 2nd stay at the hospital came for a visit and brought baby Rebecca with her. It occurred to me that time with my children might do more for my recovery than any additional time in the hospital. The doctors admitted that they were unable to heal my stomach, and although my surgeon had hoped I would stay at least another day for additional food through the feeding tube, he relented when I begged to be released. He looked into the possibility of me going home with the feeding tube in place, but my insurance was unwilling to cover it. Another blessing. My friend drove me home and had to leave almost immediately, as she needed to return to her own family in Virginia, more than 5 hours from New York. She left my home sobbing, feeling that my situation had not yet been resolved. She had stayed with my children while Derek stayed with me in the hospital, and my stay there seemed fruitless. That night, after the children were asleep, Derek left to pick up his sister at the airport. She would be staying with us during her spring break from teaching elementary school music. While Derek was gone, I decided to research gastroparesis myself through the internet. What I found was shocking and greatly disturbing. My research confirmed that the vagus nerve had most likely been nicked during my surgery. The greatest majority of cases seemed to occur after gallbladder surgery, which had in fact been removed with the liver. However, little to nothing was known about possible ways to reverse the damage. Some cases lasted a short time, others lasted years with no improvement, and still others appeared to disappear only to reoccur later. A feeding tube in the nose was only a temporary solution, often being replaced by what was referred to as a J-tube, a plastic canal surgically implanted in one side, allowing liquid food to be poured directly into the base of the stomach. I was most disheartened by a site called Gastroparesis Friends. This was an internet support group, which functioned primarily through a chat room. I was not required to join the group or to participate. I was allowed to simply read what others with my condition had written. What struck me most about almost all the entries was the bitterness of the writers. Certainly, I could understand their frustration and anxiety over this horrible condition, but because my experience had thus far been a short one, I could not relate to the defeat echoing repeatedly through the computer screen. One writer referred to food as the enemy, and to holidays centered around meals, such as Thanksgiving, torture. A part of me was overcome with empathy for these people, but a greater part of me was terrified to become one of them. I was shocked to read how long many of these people had suffered with gastroparesis. Several months, 2 years, 5 years, 12 years. I realized that night that this was not a simple post-surgical complication that would remedy itself, and my research confirmed that there was nothing the medical world could do for me. My eyes filled with tears as my heart filled with fear. How could I care for my children? How could I support my husband? How could I ever train guide dogs again? How could I even get out of bed and take a shower? I was exhausted, confused, and afraid that I may soon need another feeding tube or a J-tube surgically implanted in my side. It suddenly occurred to me that I just could not do it. I could not function in my life if this condition continued. I needed help. I turned to the only one I knew who could help me. I walked to my bed and I knelt on my knees. Though I prayed often and in many different places and postures, I rarely kneel. Perhaps this is part of my problem. From my knees, I prayed a prayer of complete desperation. I admitted that I had tried to carry my burdens independently, and I prayed for forgiveness. I prayed from the depths of my soul. I could no longer do this alone. I prayed that if this was what God wanted for my life, I would live it to the best of my ability, but I could not care for my family in the midst of this condition without His help. Lord, I have no choice but to give my fears over to You. I can no longer do it without You. For me, the importance of this prayer came second only to my prayer for salvation, almost 15 years before. I felt God lovingly hold me as I struggled against Him, and I am sure I heard a gentle smile in His voice as He responded, "Kristen, trust me." The next morning began a recovery of my stomach. I could not eat much, but I kept down what I did eat. In fact, I have not vomited since the night I prayed that prayer. In a matter of months, I no longer had difficulty with eating, and my liver remained clear of the cancer. I knew that by placing my faith and trust in God, He had healed me. But our times of struggle were not over. God had many more gifts to give to me.